Compliance, the final frontier. Tom Fox is the voyager of trekking through compliance. His mission? To explore the original series and seek out and share what it can teach you about compliance. Here's your host, Tom Fox.
Episode 21, Return of the Archons. In this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, we consider the compliance lessons learned from the episode Return of the Archons, which occurred on Stardate 3156.2. The Enterprise arrives at planet Beta 3 seeking information on the USS Archon, which was reported lost nearly 100 years earlier. A two-man landing party is sent to the surface, but only Lieutenant Sulu returns from the planet, and he exhibits strange behavior. Kirk beams down with another party to investigate. They find the inhabitants living in a static 19th century Earth-style culture with little or no individual expression or creativity. The entire culture is ruled over by cloaked and cowed lawgivers, controlled by a reclusive dictator known as Landru. The landing party has arrived at the start of festival, a period of violence and destruction and sexual aggressiveness, which apparently is the only time Landru does not exercise control over the beaten population. Kirk's landing party seeks shelter from the mob at the boarding house owned by Rhaegar. A friend of Rhaegar suspects that the visitors are not of the body and summons lawgivers. The lawgivers kill Rhaegar's friend Tamar for resisting the will of Landru. When the landing party refuses to do as the lawgivers say, the lawgivers become immobile and Rhaegar leads the Enterprise landing party down to a hiding place. Rhaegar reveals that Landru pulled the Archons down from the sky. Contacting the Enterprise, Kirk learns that heat beams from the planet are attacking the Enterprise, which must use all of its power for its shields. Its orbit is deteriorating, and it will crash 12 hours unless the beams are turned off. A projection of Landru appears in the hiding place, and Kirk and his team are rendered unconscious by ultrasonic waves. The landing party is imprisoned in a dungeon, and McCoy is absorbed into the body and placed under Landru's control. Kirk is taken to a chamber of high technology, whereas he is also to be absorbed into the body. But Marplon, one of the priests of Landru, who is immune to Landru's control, rescues Kirk and Spock. Returning to the dungeon, Rhaegar and Marplon tell how Landru saved their society from war and anarchy some 6,000 years ago and reduced the planet's technology to a simpler level. McCoy summons the lawgivers to absorb Kirk and Spock, who subdue them and don their robes. Marplon takes Kirk and Spock to the Hall of Audiences, where priests commune with Landru. A projection of Landru appears and threatens Kirk, Spock, and all Batans who saw the landing party with death. Kirk and Spock use their phasers to blast through the wall and expose the truth. The reclusive Landru is actually a computer, and Landru, who built the machine, had died some 6,000 years ago. The computer neutralizes their phasers, and Kirk argues with the machine, telling it that it has destroyed the creativity of the people, killing the body. Concluding that the computer's prime directive is to destroy evil, Kirk forces the computer to self-destruct, freeing the people of Beta 3. The heat beam stops and the Enterprise is saved. Kirk agrees to leave the Federation advisors and educators on the planet to help the civilization advance free of Landru's dominance. So, what is a fun fact about this case? Well, it is the first appearance of the Prime Directive. And that leads to our compliance takeaways, because the Prime Directive, for any Star Trek fan, is well known as sort of the rule. And it's the rule by which all Starship Enterprise and United Federation of Planets personnel must live by. Of course, the Prime Directive specifies that Starfleet personnel are not to disturb the timeline regarding the development of a planet. However, Kirk feels that the Prime Directive applies to a living, growing culture of which Beta 3 is not. and therefore the destruction of Landru in the form of the computer is not a violation of the Prime Directive. So interesting interpretation by Kirk. And it really begs the question, is there room for flexibility within the Prime Directive? Here we see the Prime Directive brought to us for the first time. It would seem to be an absolute rule, yet Kirk finds room for flexibility. And I thought that's an interesting way to think about your number one directive, as in Prime Directive. Is this something that should be an absolute or not? Or is it really frontier justice because Kirk is so far away that he has the flexibility to basically be a sheriff on the edge of the frontier? The second thing, compliance takeaway, is groupthink. And here, everyone who is of the body lives in peace and harmony with each other in Landru. But clearly, groupthink has killed off all advancement and cultural development in this planet. So this is something that I would ask you to consider. Do you have too much groupthink in your compliance function? And do you have too much groupthink in your corporation? So groupthink can be positive, but rarely so. And it's shown how damaging it can be in this episode. And finally, for number 3, AI. Clearly, a computer is running the show here, but it doesn't have the human element. And that is where I think many technophobes really fall down, because they fail to see the human element needed in artificial intelligence. They think that computers are simply going to take over and run everything from programmable, logical, and learnable transactions, and that's just not correct. The human element must always be present. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join me tomorrow where I take up one of the all-time favorites, Space Seed.
If you enjoyed this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, you can help it grow by sharing it with the biggest Trek fan you know.